Hello everybody, Nick here. Just before we jump into the review of The Deadly Assassin, there's just a few things I want to get out of the way first. First of all, a shout out to Jack McCulloch, aka Jack the Film Fanatic, who this story is his favourite of all time, so this is a special shout out to him. And also, not only that, but this season is his favourite season. Philip Hinchcliffe's era of the show is his favourite era of the show, and Tom Baker is his favourite Doctor. So, it's all coming together for him at this point. So, a very special shout out to him for this episode, this story. Second of all, as you may have seen, the last review had a dedication to Elizabeth Sladen, Sarah Jane Smith's actress, and actor Stephen Thorne, who played Eldrad in that story, as well as Omega and Azal. And the thing, I did that because when I was doing editing for that video, I was having a look at Stephen Thorne's Wikipedia page, and it said that he had died that very day. So, I was editing the video on the 26th of May 2019, and he had sadly passed away that day. So I decided to make the video in dedication of him, and also in the dedication of Elizabeth Sladen, being her last classic story. So, yeah, and I also provided the music was the Indian theme from Demons of the Punjab from Series 11. At the end of that story, there's a nice Indian theme at the end, which also fits the ending of that story, by the way, if you've seen my review of that. Actually, I don't know if I mentioned it then, but if you've seen the story, you'll know what I'm talking about. And finally, the third thing is that I rewatched Planet of Evil yesterday, which is the next story, which I'll do, and in my Mask of Mandragora review, I said that is going to be my least favourite story of the season. After the rewatch, I've changed my mind. I actually like it a bit more on this occasion. I mean, there's still bits I don't like, but I'll get to that in its own review. But basically, it's now no longer my least favourite of season 14. Mask of Mandragora now takes that. I don't want to say honour. That position at the moment. A conclusive position will be given in the ranking. Don't be surprised if it's Mask, though. So yes, I just wanted to mention those now. So yeah, there's a few other things that might need mentioning later, either in this video or in the Planet of Evil one, but I think this is enough for pre-Deadly Assassin news. So without any further delay, The Deadly Assassin. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of Doctor Who Season 14, Story 3, The Deadly Assassin, which is the one companion-like story of the classic series, besides Mission to the Unknown, which was Doctor and companion-like. But excluding that, this is the companion-like story of the classic series. New series, of course, would have a couple of episodes where the Doctor or the companion are not around, and you either got the Doctor on their own, or the companion or companions on their own, or a guest character like Elton or Sally Sparrow, for example. And the card just ruined that shot for me. I'm going to keep this bit in, though, because I think it's a good take. But anyway, so Deadly Assassin, what do I think of it? Fucking awesome. Yeah, Jack McCulloch, whose favourite story this is, will be pleased to know that that I basically agree with him. I mean, it's not my favourite story, but it is still a really awesome story, so I agree with him there. Anyway, so, Deadly Assassin. The plot is the Doctor has been summoned back to Gallifrey, as seen at the end of the previous story, and on his way back he gets a vision from the Matrix showing him assassinating the President. And then he arrives back on Gallifrey, and he's intending to try and avert this assassination. Note, there is a simple clue that what he's shown in the Matrix is a prediction, but not what actually happens, because the Doctor changes his clothes during the story. He doesn't wear his usual scarf and coat costume, except when he's in the TARDIS for a bit, and then he basically trick some of the guards to hint it. Oh, by the way, when one of those guards enters the TARDIS, why does he say, "Don't move," when the Doctor isn't moving? Well, it's actually the hat and scarf and coat on the hat stand. I think he says it twice, or he just tells him not to move and then says, "Don't move," or something. There's a shot of it just not moving, and he just says, "Don't move," and I think he's already given the instruction already. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's just basically, if that was actually a person there, it's basically like what last story where there was a guard saying, "Stop or we'll shoot or fire," when they're complying. So that seems to be a thing in these stories, that compliancy is still met with warning for some reason. In this case, it's a hat. It's the clothes on a hat stand, but that makes it even more silly that he says, "Don't move." But that's just something that bothered me. But it's not going to degrade the story. Okay, so there is quite a bit of running around the inside of the building for the first half of the first episode, but it's okay. It's actually quite fun to see the Doctor just playing around with the guards a little bit, and then heading back to the TARDIS, and then watching some of basically the news, Gallifreyan news. And yes, this story does turn the Time Lords into bureaucrats and stuffy politicians. But I will say, actually, going into this story on the latest rewatched, I actually thought it was done okay. In fact, really well done. I mean, I do prefer the Time Lords as they were in the War Games. In fact, I probably still preferred how they are in The End of Time, Day of the Doctor. Not so much Hellbent, but they're still on a similar level. But to the stuffy politicians of the mid to late 70s to the mid to late 80s, I think they're less bureaucratic in Trial of a Time Lord. They're a bit more focused on one thing for that story, so makes sense. But certainly with the Deadly Assassin to 5 Doctors, they definitely very much like this, with hints of that in Trial, and maybe a few hints in the Pertwee ones, but not so much. But certainly, this is the first time that they have definitely been betrayed like this, and it's been something quite controversial and split opinion about over the years. But yeah, in this story, it actually makes sense. There's actually a bit of world building with that, and actually helps world build the Time Lords and their history. I just wish that we had some sort of similarities to those War Game Time Lords as well, who were pretty much gods as well. So maybe later down the line we could get something of a compromise. But as I mentioned, I actually think it was handled well for this story. I think not so much in later stories, but at the same time they lose less of that attention as well. So that either it is because there's less of it means that there's more. That means it's not quite as good, or it's not that noticeable, so it doesn't really matter. So I would say Invasion of Time and Arc Infinity's ones aren't quite as good, and then 5 Doctors and Trial, it just doesn't really matter that much. Just as well, 5 Doctors is one of my favourite stories. Plus, I also like this news presentation angle that they've got. It actually makes them a bit relatable in a way. Anyway, the Doctor manages to get himself into make his way down to the Panopticon, but he then realises he's got to try and stop the assassination, and he finds the gun. And he tries to try and stop the assassin, who should be down there, because he knows that they're actually going to be down there. Or at least that's what I think he says later on. But the gun is deliberately meant to miss, but he's still going to get framed. This is all part of an elaborate plot by a mysterious villain, who is actually revealed not in a twist. I mean, maybe it's a surprise when they first saw it, audiences first saw it, but it's not made to be an end of episode or towards the end of the story twist. It's just that it just happens about during part 1. But it's nice to know that they know who they're up against by the time they discover who they're up against. And it is, of course, the Master. And not just any Master. The Crispy Master, he's been known to be called. Peter Pratt is taken over after Roger Delgado sadly passed away in '73. So they couldn't do any more stories with him. But they've been able to recast the role, as, of course, he's a Time Lord. So, for this story, they've managed to bring him back. This time, the excuse is that he's used up all his lives. He's on his 13th and final incarnation. And he's trying to get the power, get the sash and the key so that he can open the Eye of Harmony and get some more powers. And he wants his servant, the person serving him, who turns out to be the actual assassin. I'll reveal who later. And wants him to assassinate the president, and the Doctor is framed for it. It's after the trial stuff that the story gets really engaging, as the Doctor is trying to convince the Chancellor Spindle, I believe it was, played by George Pastel, who's previously appeared in the show. So after using Article 17 to prevent him from being killed after the trial, the Doctor is able to have enough time to find out what's actually happening, and manages to get Pastel and Coordinator Engane on his side. And eventually they discover that it's the Master behind all of this, but the Master kills a few more people, including that really nice television presenter. And the Doctor then decides to fight him in the Matrix, as the Master sent the prediction to him. The Doctor then has to actually fight the Master's servant to fight him, and yeah, there's quite a lot of stuff in the sequence. Part 3 actually is more focused on a bit more of a jungle, foresty event setting for the most of runtime, but there is quite a bit of different places, mainly a quarry, but still different places to go towards the end of Part 2 and throughout Part 3, and a little bit of Part 4. And of course, the end of Part 3 reveals who the Master's servant was. It was Chancellor Goff, who is a high-ranking Time Lord and was number one poll, most likely to be the president's replacement, the next president. However, it turns out he wasn't the president's choice. That's why he teams up with the Master. So he has the president killed, and then eventually make himself the president later on via election, hopefully, if he achieves it. And apparently he's the only other candidate, so we'll see. And he wants to get the Doctor out of the way as part of the plan. The Doctor kind of foils that bit a little. But anyway, you see him trying to kill the Doctor. Eventually the Doctor manages to overpower him, and the Master has him killed. And the Doctor and company have to try and stop the Master from achieving his goal as well. First they have to find out what he's doing, and then they have to stop him. And it's really interesting seeing all of this. It's got some really exciting moments. I think it does slow down a little bit during the Matrix stuff, and there is quite a lot just before that episode 2 cliffhanger. There is already quite a lot before we move on to episode 3's bit, which is mostly set in the Matrix. It is nice to go back to Gallifrey for a little bit more time with Engane and Spindle, plus the Master sending a possessed Time Lord guard, who I think is the guard who was torturing the Doctor at the start of Part 2, and taking quite delight in doing so at the same time, whether that's just because that's what he normally does, or because he's delighting in who he thinks was the President's assassin, is up for debate. He's basically the Captain Ola of the Deadly Assassin. Ola, of course, being a character from the Macra era, who I've been, certainly in the animated version, has been taking great delight in his work. So that's basically the Deadly Assassin, and it's really great. I've wondered what the story would be like if Sarah Jane or Leela had the companions who left in the previous story and the one who would come in the next one. I was wondering how they would have fared in this story, what the dynamic would have been, what their roles would have been. But yeah, this story was written specifically to be what if the Doctor was on his own. And whilst I don't think the Doctor should be on their own for a while, I think this one does serve as a good example of what it could be like. And it works really well. I mean, I would like a few more Doctor or companion stories on their own in the classic series, but I don't think they should do it full time, if you know what I mean. I think there should be a companion there for the most runs, but you can have the occasional story where maybe one of them's gone off to have a look at something else. Maybe the companion's dropped off home, but they've got to find out a mystery going on there. Whilst they're doing that, the Doctor goes to a party or something, and stuff happens there. Or pre-Invasion of Time returning to Gallifrey stuff, basically. But yeah, those would have been something good to explore, and I think the story does have a good, it's a nice little template for such a thing. But it's not really been done since, apart from, well, not done since in the classic series. New series, it would dabble with it a bit more. But yeah, it's really well effective. Like I said, I actually thought all the Time Lord mythology and world building was really great, even if the characters have been turned into stuffy politicians and bureaucrats. But again, as I mentioned, it's been done, it's been handled really well, and some of those some of them are actually really nice, and also it actually helps with the world building. It's just a shame that they don't have a compromise between this and what they were like in the war games. That's just about it. Also, Robert Holmes, you couldn't have thought of a better acronym for better. They've got the Celestial Intervention Agency on Gallifrey introduced in this story, and yeah, basically it's the CIA. So you couldn't have come up with another name and its own acronym, because basically if you just say, oh, the CIA are at it again, you could be. It's like if someone just said, oh, it's the CIA are in this story, you're like, but this story is taking place on Gallifrey, how are the CIA in the story? And you say, oh, it's the Central Investigation Agency and Celestial Intervention Agency, and the person who doesn't know who they are, I'd be like, but they share the same name with the Central Intelligence Agency, the American organization. So yeah, that's not really a problem. It's just something I just wanted to bring up. It's like you couldn't have thought of another name or another acronym, maybe. Also, they don't actually state that Time Lords have 13 lives. They do say that Time Lord, the 12th regeneration, that's it, and they imply 13 lives. But they don't actually outright say it. But I think since then we've been able to interpret that. So, yeah, 13. I don't know if they mentioned the Master was on his 13th life. They certainly said his last. They might have done. So, if they did that, then yeah, then they pretty much established it full stop. But we have been able to take it as fact since then. So there's also no point where they say a Time Lord can only regenerate, a male reincarnation can only regenerate into another male incarnation. There's also no point saying they can't change skin colour, nor could they change physical appearance where, well, of course they change physical appearance, but I meant from humanoid to, I don't know, looking like a bird or a cat or something. So they just say that they can just change, basically, as we've been seeing throughout the Doctor's lives and now the Masters, that they can regenerate, and but they've only got a limited number of lives, which in that case contradicts what we saw in The Brain of Morbius. Otherwise, Peter Davison's Doctor would have died on the TARDIS in the case of Androzani, on the TARDIS floor, I should say. So those other 8 Doctors, they can't be. Those are first 8 faces. They can't be the Doctor. Maybe the other, the Doctor is supposedly the other reloomed or something. But the Doctor himself can't be, otherwise Peter Davison is the last incarnation. So, yeah, he's so not the last incarnation. But yeah, the introduction of the rules of regeneration, but with some rules not sewn down so that later stories can play around with it, work effectively. And is again more world building to these characters who we haven't really saw much of. It does surprise me that Robert Holmes is writing such a story, because he has said I think he said that he didn't like the Time Lords. I'm not sure why, they hadn't really appeared that much beforehand, and so he just decided to create them like, well, as they are in this story. And I'm wondering if this is the version that Russell T Davies didn't like, or if he just, again, didn't like the Time Lords full stop, and hence the Time War, until he brought them back towards the end of the 10th Doctor's life, and kind of made them a kind of a compromise. So, yeah, what is it about Time Lords that writers, or, well, head writers or script editors just don't like? Heck, obviously Stephen Moffat doesn't seem to have liked them that much, judging by their treatment in Hellbent. It seems like the only people who actually like writing Time Lords are Terrence Dicks and Malcolm Hulke, the creators. And maybe to a minor extent Bob Baker and Dave Martin in The Three Doctors. But besides that, it seems that people aren't so keen on writing Time Lords. You know, at least on screen anyway. Maybe expanded media, it might not. It might be a bit different. Fans of the Gallifrey series, please let me know what you think of characters in that series. The story is very set-based as well, but I think the sets look really nice. I mean, there is quite a lot of green, but it still looks like a really convincing set. I think when we next see Gallifrey, there's going to be a bit more pink and red and a little bit of a dark blue in it inside of it. And then it goes a bit more whitey yellow for the next story, and then for Arc of Infinity, and then Five Doctors it's a bit white and pink. Yeah, their colour schemes are all over the place in these classic stories. And then Trial is a bit brown, maybe some pink or red somewhere. But this story is mostly green, just to say, green and maybe a bit of black. But it looks really good. Although the set they do have in this story, it doesn't look quite as big as later sets. So it does look big enough to have a lot of people there. And it was all handled really good. I think the location stuff is also really great, although it does look like it is on Earth quite a bit. And I was having a look at some of the reviews on it, and on the Wikipedia page, and some of them said they were disappointed that was more Earth-based. And yeah, I could see why they would think that. It may have been better to have some alien race planets in there alongside, but once we got Gallifrey, I think it's okay. And it's all works effectively, and it's actually nice seeing this more location-based stuff for The Matrix whilst alongside the more set-based Gallifrey. And the final fight at the end is also really great with the Doctor and the Master. Getting it on physically, this is really cool. Although I do think there'll be a better Doctor and Master fight coming up in between the classic and new series in the TV movie. I think that is a better fight, but this one has a really great one as well, and it does go on a little bit longer, but not too long, so it doesn't feel dragged out. It feels really good, and has some really great stuff. And yeah, so on the whole, Deadly Assassin is basically an amazing story. I do have my few nitpicks and problems with it, but I can get over those like I did with Genesis of the Daleks. And on the whole, it is a pretty brilliant story and another all-time classic. So I'm going to give The Deadly Assassin an easy 10 out of 10. Jack McCulloch, I hope you're happy because it's your favourite story and I've just given it the highest possible score. Because 11 out of 10 isn't really an actual score. It's more of it's just something people just say out of, just for a laugh. But yeah, but 10 out of 10, easily. I mean, it's not one of my favourite stories, but it's certainly one of the best Fourth Doctor stories. It's certainly going to be a very highly placed Fourth Doctor story. At the current time on my list, I think it's fourth. Fourth. But the lists are updated every story or every other story depending on the changes that's needed for them. And certainly this one it was already on the top 10 list, or an honourable mention, then onto the top 10 list for both Fourth Doctor and 70 stories. But now I think it's certainly in the top 5 at the very least for both. And yeah. In fact, quite a lot of the Fourth Doctor stories are topping Third Doctor stories at this point, so don't be surprised if there's not that many Third Doctor stories on my top 10 70s list, by the way. I'll let you know that, and I'll do that list just after season 17, by the way, as Haunt of Nimon will be 79 into 80. So, just after season 17, even if it's just after Shada, which is technically 1980, but that's just to finish up that season. But, yeah, and that story, and afterwards would be counted as 80s ones. Haunted Diamond and Light End of Time would count for both decades. I just want to mention a quick thing around this point, that Part 3's cliffhanger features a very famous and controversial cliffhanger where the Doctor's head is pushed underneath water. This sparked a lot of complaints, especially from Mary Whitehouse, due to children potentially being upset that their hero is about to drown, being drowned, and it would cause them nightmares or get upset. That was her concern. And you know, from all the concerns and problems she has, this one, I do see why she got quite upset about that. I will also say that it works very effectively as a cliffhanger, and they did manage to pull it off very well. And another thing, there is another still framed cliffhanger that they have at the end of Part 1 as well, which I think wasn't needed. They didn't need to worry about that one, but the Part 3 one that everybody knows works really well, and I believe it's very effective. So just wanted to say that one. That's because I forgot to actually talk about it in the review, so here it is now. Anyway, that's it from my review of The Deadly Assassin. Thank you for watching. Next time, we'll be looking at Leela's first story, The Face of Evil, which I mentioned at the start was formerly my least favourite of the season, and one that I actually disliked. Not too dissimilar to Planet of Evil before I rewatched that. In fact, this one was previously below that, but after rewatching it, it's actually pretty good, apart from a few things that I didn't really like. So anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. Hello everyone, Nick here. Hang on. I'll start again. First of all, shout out to Jack McCulloch, aka Jack the film critic, film fanatic. Sorry. First of all, a shout out to Jack. First of all, a shout out to Jack McCulloch, aka Jack the What am I? I'm sorry, Jack, if you're watching these bloopers. Okay. But that's just something for anyway, and this, I mean, yeah, they are a bit. Yeah, cut that last bit. Cut the bit after baseball. In the meantime, this is. Yeah, I'm back on. I think I think he would. Oh, sorry. No, I'm thinking of the wrong character. And he's so and you know what? It's anyways, so and what it is like, and it works effectively. Well, more than effectively. But so. Hello everybody, Nick here, just to